What is up, AR students, parents? I'm Lee, the AR Students Director, and I just wanted to drop in real quick and give you an update on where we are with AR students at the end of this January 2021. Since the fall, we've really embraced this whole Asher Ridge outside situation, and it's been working really well, honestly. We've got more space, more ability to play some messy games, do things that we generally wouldn't be able to do in the tight quarters of our office, and we're doing it all while keeping our distance and staying safe. So we hope that your students are coming home on Sunday afternoons encouraged, having learned something, and having had some time to process life with their small groups. And speaking of small groups, that's the coolest part about AR students right now and all the time. From all of our small group leaders, our leaders have been giving me story after story after story of students really opening their eyes to some new truths and some new perspectives on the God that loves them and growing together as a group. That community means so much. Even if your student isn't super plugged in just yet, it's coming. And that's the part I really want to encourage you to stick around for. So thanks. Thanks for getting your students there on Sunday mornings. Thanks for making Sunday mornings AR students in person a priority in their lives. I know a lot of them would rather sleep in on Sundays. And to be honest, I mean, we all at some point really like to sleep, but the investment that you're helping them make in their fellow students and their friends and their small group leaders, the investment that you're making in them by bringing them there, it's going to make a massive difference down the road. So all that being said, February is coming, and the real reason I'm talking to you today is because we're running a series all month long called Relationship Goals. Relationship Goals. Now, I know that's probably really scary. We're going to talk about dating. We're talking about relationships. We're going to talk about intimacy. We're going to bring up the sex. All of that stuff is so complicated these days, and we want to make it as simple as possible for your students' dating lives to be successful and as painless as possible when the troubles do end up coming, because they will. And the reason the series is called Relationship Goals, this is on purpose. This is not an accident. For way too long, churches and youth groups have spent all of their energy building sets of rules for students to follow. Rules, even if they've gotten the purest of intentions behind them, pun intended, they almost always lead to some sort of challenge. There's the questions of what happens when you break the rules. There's the question of how close can we get to the rules without breaking them. There's the blatant, I'm not following no rules. And all of that couched within the shame and guilt that comes down the road when those rules inevitably do get broken. So we've decided that rules aren't the best way to frame relationships. And honestly, it's not the way God intends us to do relationships with one another. We shouldn't be strapped down to a set of rules that are robotic and objective all the time. Sometimes it takes people. We don't work in that sort of rigid rationality. And so as a result, we're changing the script. We're flipping the framework completely on its head by building relationship goals. Ways of thinking about relationships that are long-term focused, aligned with how God intends us to be in relationship with one another. And we want students to build relationships that will last or will end with grace instead of a huge blaze of drama. I know that happens all the time for our middle schoolers and high schoolers. Relationships are super messy, and all of you know that just as well as I do. But I think with some solid goals, some solid backing to those goals, our students will be much better suited to handle those relationships well and experience the full gift from God. Relationships can truly be at their very best. So that's the vision behind it. But I know there's a lot of details in there, and I want to help you understand a little bit more about what we're going to do, give you some resources, tell you what we're not going to do, and give you the tools you need to be fully prepared for those conversations when they come your way. Speaking of conversations when they come your way, the awkwardness that this is going to create is going to come home with your students. Just flat out truth. The things we're going to talk about on Sunday mornings during this series are going to be things that we're going to encourage your students to have conversations with you about. After all, they didn't come from nowhere, right? There was a relationship involved at some level to create them. And you have a wealth of experience and wisdom and love for these students that can really lead them over the wall, over the line into some awesome relationships. So anytime that a student has a question, specific or otherwise, about relationships, we're going to push them towards you, okay? If a question comes up about something very specific about this way of doing a relationship, how to handle divorce, how to handle sex in a relationship that doesn't really work, like a lot of those questions, you are much better equipped to answer than we are in terms of giving students specifics. And so whenever a question comes up about a very specific topic and not this whole goal-oriented approach that we've got at Air Students, we're going to talk about it, but we're also going to encourage students to always come talk to you about it, because you know them better than we do. You're more invested in them than we are. We could never possibly be invested in them as much as you are, because you're with them all the time. We only get them for like an hour a week. You're with them every single day. So we're going to push students to continue these conversations with you at home, because we believe that you're the person best suited to answer any questions your students might have about faith, about relationships, about sex, all those things. We want you to be able to have those conversations with your students, because here's the other reality. Your students are going to talk about it. And in fact, most of them already are. From 6th grade all the way to 12th grade, your students are having these conversations about sex, about birth control, about masturbation, about porn, about relationships, everything, dating, the whole 9 yards. They're having these conversations. They really are. And at the moment, if their church, if their youth group, if their AR students, small groups aren't the people that are willing to talk about it, then who will be? Those are going to be the kids on the school bus, the kids in the locker rooms, the kids in the dressing rooms. That's going to be where your students are going to have these conversations, whether we talk about them or not. We want church. We want Ashley Ridge Church. We want AR students. We want these small groups to be the place where a student feels fully comfortable, fully vulnerable, fully able to have conversations with things that aren't always the simplest, the easiest, or the least messy, the least awkward. So we're going to do our very best to create a safe space for your students to ask questions and have those conversations, because we believe that the church needs to be where those hard conversations happen. Because if not here, then where? Somewhere we don't have control, somewhere we can't tell people about the way God intends relationships to be? No, we're going to be the place that gets to have those conversations. And that said, we know we have a mixed age group at AR students. Just in the stage that our church is in, we don't have the capability of splitting middle schoolers and high schoolers, or girls and boys and all those things into those smaller groups. So that's why we're going to make it as simple as possible. Everything your student hears, hear me out here, everything your student hears from me in a large group setting will be middle school level appropriate. Middle school level appropriate. Ideally, early middle school level appropriate. And we do this for 2 reasons. That way, our middle schoolers can stay engaged and are able to absorb as much as possible without me blowing the top off of something for the very first time for them, right? How embarrassing would it be if a kid learned about Santa Claus the first time at church? That could create a lot of issues with that kid and church. The same goes for any sort of thing that has to do with relationships and sex. We don't want to be the place where the top gets blown off of everything for these students. The reality is a lot of them probably already know more than you think they know, but we still want to be safe. We still don't want church to be the place where that initial trauma happens. We want that to happen in the safety of their own home, or if it's already happened, we want to make sure that there's a safe place for those kids who haven't seen it yet, haven't been exposed to it just yet. That's the first reason. And the second reason for keeping everything middle school appropriate is because the reality is that our high school students engage much better in small group settings when they're given opportunities to have mature conversations, to engage the awkward and the weirdness of relationships in a more personal way. That's why we're going to try and stick with that 6th, 7th grade level maturity in our large group settings, and then cater small group conversations towards the age groups more specifically, which means that middle school and high school will have different small group questions on any given week. That's something we've not done before. Normally we let our small group leaders push conversations a little bit deeper with our older students, with our high school students. But now we're actually going to write 2 completely different sets of questions. One so that we can keep to the middle school crowd, one so that we can keep to the high school crowd their maturity levels. Large group conversations are also always going to be goal-oriented, not laden with super specific language. Like, I'm not going to bring up the more awkward terms like masturbation and pornography in our large group settings, because the intent is that age-appropriate conversations can happen in small group. The fact is our students are going to be more in the discovering porn and learning about sex bracket, right, for the very first time, while our high schoolers are talking more about having sex and birth control and those types of things. And we don't need those conversations to be mixed. And it'll be much more effective to have those conversations in small groups anyways. So that should hopefully take a load off of our middle school parents' shoulders and also encourage our high school parents to keep their students in the room. And here's the thing. Like I said, we're aware that some middle schoolers have been exposed to more than others. But one of the things our students is totally committed to is having those hard conversations. like I said, at the end of the day, they've probably already heard about it. So we're going to stick to that. We're going to stick to our guns. We're not going to be the place where tough conversations can't happen. In fact, we're going to be the safest, best place. And then we're going to push them right back to you to talk to their parents. And so that's why we don't want you to walk into this series blind. That's why you're hearing from me right now. And that's why you're going to get a new email with a new video from me that'll look probably exactly like this every week. You'll get an email on Thursday, Friday, towards the end of the week with the topic we're going to talk about that week. We're going to give you the small group questions ahead of time. We're going to give you the bottom line. We're going to tell you everything so that you're fully prepared to have those conversations with your students, either right before, right after the week, somewhere in there. You can continue those conversations with your students. February is 4 Sundays, and we're going to do this for the whole month. So look for those emails for the start of each weekend, starting next week, probably on the 4th or the 5th. And before I give you some really, really great resources for you as parents, I do want to mention one thing that we're not going to cover. The series is not going to be about sexuality, LGBTQ plus sexual orientations, or gender identity. Those are conversations that we at AR students and myself personally would love to have with their students, but they're really difficult to have in large groups or even small groups because people are at different maturity levels. The fact is, a junior who has friends that are out in gay or lesbian or some other LGBTQ orientation, their maturity level is completely different from a 6th grader that might not have any friends, might not know anybody that is in that stage of life yet. And so we're certainly not opposed to talking about it, but the reality is that maturity differences aren't going to make it possible for us to have those conversations in our current way of doing things. So be encouraged. Know that those things are not on the table for this series. If questions do come up during small group, we'll address them. Our small group leaders are being trained this upcoming week on how to handle all of these conversations, how to embrace the person first over the problems they're going through, refreshing them on mandated reporter stuff. All of that kind of stuff is happening this week. So rest assured your small group leaders are going to be prepared for those conversations. That said, we're not encouraging them. That is not what's going on with this series specifically. And then the other thing that I really wish we had the capacity to do, but we just don't yet, is to do an all boys or an all girls event. Something that really happens often when this sort of topic comes up, because there are some different difficulties between a middle school boys and, for example, a high school girl's way of doing relationships. There are some differences, but we just don't have the time or the resources or the space on a Sunday morning to make that something that's good and effective. But that is something we are definitely looking to once we get back into the high school, back into the building permanently, and down the line, something we would love, love, love to do with AR students. We're just not quite there just yet. So, all this being said, I'm going to leave you with a couple resources. A couple things that no matter where you are in your parenting journey, this is your first student going to 6th grade for the very first time, or you're on your last kid kicking them out the door, they're about to be a senior in high school, and you're about to be an empty nester. No matter where you land on the parenting spectrum, I've got 2 great resources here in front of you. One of them is for you and your student to read, to look at together, if you so choose, and then one is just for you. So let's start with the one that's for both. It's this guy right here, The New Rules for Love, Sex, and Dating by Andy Stanley. This book is fantastic. It's filled with so many good goal-oriented ways of doing relationships, sex, and dating. It will apply to a middle schooler all the way through a high schooler, and it's going to be a great, great resources for you. I've learned a lot from this in terms of the way I do my relationship with my wife now. Okay, so it's super, super helpful. Definitely pick this up. And if you're not into the whole reading a book thing, if your students might not be into a real reading a book thing, the good news is Andy has a 4-part sermon series about this very topic. It's called the same thing. You can search for it online, and you can also just click the link down at the bottom of the email that you got to this video from. So make sure you check this out, The New Rules for Love, Sex, and Dating by Andy Stanley. It's a great, great resource for you and your students. This is the one. This is the one book. If someone was asking me what the one book for a student about sex relationships would be, this is it. This is the one. So check this out. The other one, and this is just for you, is this book right here. It's called The Grown-Ups Guide to Teenage Humans by Josh Shipp. This book is chock full of parenting goodness. It's fantastic. It is the gold standard on how to parent teenagers. Josh Shipp's approach is very much, he's conversational. He wants you to succeed. You read the book and you believe he he wants us to succeed as parents, even though I'm not a parent yet. This is fantastic. There's chapters on all of the topics that we're going to cover in relationship goals when it comes to relationships, dating, sex, all of those things, but it's also got so many other great things in it too. Stuff like eating disorders, bullying, all of those different things that happen in a teenager's life, this book goes into. So make sure you check this one out. It's fantastic. And if a big, scary book is going to keep you from doing it, let me tell you, Josh Shipp also has a fantastic YouTube channel. And he's got a whole playlist of stuff for parents of teenagers. Make sure you go check that out. Again, links are in that email, so make sure you click those links, check these out. Pick up a book, maybe pick up a book for a friend or for a student that you know, or your own student, and get to it. I promise you won't regret it. These are books that will stay on your shelves for a long, long time. So, beyond those resources, the 2 actual books that I showed you and their accompanying digital materials, whatever you want to say, there's some more resources. And the best resource is you. It's all of you together. We believe in this little thing around here at Ashridge Church called Life is Better Together. And the reality is that the best way to parent is to parent together. We believe at AR Students, and the same is true at AR Kids and AR Littles, that we can partner together to parent your students, your kids, as best as possible. We can be a small piece of the puzzle for your parenting journey. And so that's why we want to encourage you to talk to one another, okay? Talk to a parent who has an older kid. Talk to a parent who maybe has a kid from the opposite sex. That can help you understand what it's like to be on the other side. Talk to one another. And here's the thing, if you're not plugged in with any of the parents yet, if you don't know any of the other parents, let me know. I would be happy to connect you with some parents that are willing to help, that are willing to have conversations about this, because the reality is no one has all of the answers, right? We're all learning as we go. No one gives you a book and boom, you're an instant perfect parent, right? It doesn't work like that. We all have to do it together. So if you need help connecting with other parents, please let me know. I would love for the AR students' parents to get to know one another more than they already do. You guys are awesome, but figure out ways to grow together. That would be fantastic. That would be so cool to see happen at AR Students. The more that you are invested in one another and in your students, it trickles down to your students. They see that. They see that you're hanging out with other students' parents. They want that community just as much for you as they do for themselves. It's a big, big deal. It'll help them grow closer to God, help them grow closer to each other. Those are the things that really matter. And we would love to see that happen as much as possible. It's already happening, but I'd love to see it happen more, especially when it comes to this whole relationships stuff. The last thing I want to say is that if you have any questions, and I mean any questions, it doesn't matter if it's small, if it's big, there's nothing that's too small. I will answer every one of your questions. I really want this to be as great an experience for your students and for you as it possibly can be. Please let me know, okay? It doesn't matter what it is. It can be a big question, small question, whatever it is. I want to know what the anxieties you have are about these topics. What is hard about this? What is easy about this? Talk to me. Let's keep this line of communication open. As I said, every week you're going to be getting a video just like this one with that week's small group questions and content and all those things. We're going to go over all of it ahead of time so that you know what your students are walking into, you know what your students are walking back into your car with. So we hope that those very awkward conversations will at least be somewhat prepared for. But beyond that, if you have any questions, please let me know. You can text me. My phone number is in the email that you just got. My email address is the email address you just got that email from. But if you need it, it's Lee, L-E-E, at ashridgechurch.org. Please drop me a line, shoot me a text, call me, send a carrier pigeon, whatever you need to do to get in touch with me. Smoke signals, skywriting, whatever it is. Maybe don't skywrite something awkward about your student, but maybe you have to do that. Whatever it takes. We want to do this together. Okay? I can't do this whole AR Students thing without your help. And we believe that we offer something to your students by being here. And so thank you so much for watching. I know this was long. I really appreciate it. The next ones won't be as long, I promise. Just had to get it all to you all at once. Please don't miss relationship goals. We'll see you.